In recent years, histopathologists have started to produce these highly multiplexed volumetric datasets. For example, the image on this slide shows a rendering of a human tissue dataset with 29 different channels. And these channels are all co-registered volumes showing different aspects of the tissue, like cell types or certain parts of cellular structures. Now, with a growing number of channels and increasing resolutions, the file sizes of such datasets also increase, and currently range from a couple of gigabytes to over 100 gigabytes. With such file sizes, it is desirable to store the data on a server and using web-based tools to analyze them, instead of having to store them locally. So when it comes to designing a volume renderer for such data, it would be cool to have a web app instead of a native application. And more importantly, the volume renderer needs to be scalable, and the scalability required is twofold. First, it needs to be scalable to large file sizes, so we need to employ out-of-core techniques. And second, it needs to be scalable to the number of channels, because the high computational cost of raycasting grows with the number of channels. In this talk, we present Residency Octree, a novel approach for out-of-core multi-volume rendering and empty space skipping that combines the advantages of previous out-of-core methods such as page tables and octrees. It scales better to large numbers of channels and utilizes GPU memory more optimally than previous approaches. This is due to a conceptual decoupling of the spatial subdivision of an octree structure from the spatial subdivision and the resolution levels in the dataset. By providing direct access to any cached resolution from any node in the tree, it also supports rendering each channel at a different resolution if needed, without an additional performance cost. Thanks to WebGPU, it can be implemented as a pure client-side renderer. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and talk about how we can deal with large-scale data first. When a volume is too large to fit into memory, there are two obvious strategies that come to mind. We can divide it into bricks, and we can downsample it to get a multi-resolution hierarchy. With this, all that's left to do is figure out which bricks we actually need for rendering. For this purpose, state-of-the-art approaches employ ray-guided methods, which make use of the fact that rays usually don't travel through the whole volume. Instead, some bricks might not be visible because of the current viewpoint or occluding structures within the volume. Ray-guided methods record those bricks that are visible during rendering and stream them to the GPU, where they are stored in a brick cache. Current ray-guided methods are either based on octrees or page tables. Let's talk about octrees first. In octree-based approaches, there is a one-to-one mapping between bricks in a dataset and octree nodes, so each node corresponds to exactly one brick and vice versa. Also, high-resolution data is only streamed in if lower-resolution data in the same subtree is already stored in cache. As an optimization, culling information like minimum and maximum values of a brick can be stored alongside with each node to skip over empty nodes that are known to be translucent under the current viewing conditions. To access a brick during rendering, we start a traversal from the root node. At each step, we check if the node's brick is currently in cache. We use the last node that has its brick currently stored in cache for rendering. In case a node's brick is currently not in cache, we can simply use the previous node's brick instead. So the good thing about octrees is that we can substitute high-resolution data with the lower resolution. The downsides are that we have to store lower resolutions in cache even if we only ever render the high-resolution data, and also that we have to do this traversal every time instead of accessing cache bricks directly. Page tables, on the other hand, draw inspiration from memory virtualization and simply store for each brick if it's currently in cache. This allows them to provide direct access to any brick that is currently in cache without the need of a hierarchy traversal. The downside is, of course, that there is no clear strategy for substituting bricks that are currently not in cache. Like octrees, page tables can also be used for empty space skipping, but only support skipping empty bricks, and are thus a bit limited in that regard when compared to octrees. Wouldn't it be cool to have the direct access that page tables provide, but also have the security of octrees when it comes to skipping empty space and substituting missing data? And this is where the Residency Octree comes in. The problem with octrees is that bricks and nodes are intrinsically coupled, so we have this one-to-one mapping between them. Now with our approach, the Residency Octree, we decouple the spatial subdivision determined by the octree from the resolution levels in the dataset. So instead of mapping each octree node to a single brick, we map each node to a set of bricks in each resolution level. This allows us to use the Residency Octree for empty space skipping on a per node basis instead of a per brick basis. And it also allows us to evict unused low-resolution data from the brick cache if we only ever render high-resolution data or vice versa. For example, when we start traversing the Residency Octree, we can check for each node if it is empty under the current viewing conditions and continue traversal if it is not empty. When we reach a non-empty leaf node and want to render something, we can now choose any resolution that is currently in cache and access it directly. For example, the brick in the lowest resolution spans the whole volume and can thus represent each node in the octree. However, we could also choose a higher resolution if the current viewing parameters require it. This direct access of any resolution will also come in handy when rendering multiple channels, as we'll see in a bit. By decoupling nodes and bricks, the Residency Octree also allows us to have a more fine-grained spatial subdivision than the spatial subdivision in the dataset. This is especially useful in web-based scenarios where the bricking granularity might not be under our control and might not be tailored towards the needs of a volume renderer. Now let's try to get a feeling for how the three different methods behave in terms of cache utilization. We evaluate this by rendering this kingsnake dataset here and visualizing the number of bricks that are strictly required to be in cache per pixel for each of the three methods. Brighter pixels means more bricks. When using a standard octree approach to render this, we can see that around the snake skeleton a lot of bricks are required to be in cache. This is because low-resolution bricks need to be in cache so that high-resolution data can be in cache too. However, outside this region of interest where most of the volume is empty space, almost no bricks have to be in cache because entire octree nodes can be skipped. With page tables, high-resolution bricks are accessed without a hierarchy traversal, and low-resolution data is not required to be in cache. However, because of the limited empty space skipping capabilities, more non-empty bricks outside the region of interest are kept in memory. Now with the Residency Octree, we can converge to a state where we only have to keep those bricks in cache that actually contribute to the output image. So translucent bricks and low-resolution bricks that are never used do not have to be kept in memory. Now let's see how we can extend our method to multiple channels before looking at some results. In the single channel case, the Residency Octree stores for each node in which resolutions its corresponding bricks are currently available in cache. Extending this concept to multiple channels is trivial. Instead of storing the cache residency of corresponding bricks for just one channel, each node now stores their information for multiple channels. Because all channels share the same octree structure, we only have to traverse the octree once per sample during rendering, and because we can access any resolution level of any channel from any node, we can easily mix resolutions if needed or wanted. But let's look at an illustration. Here we illustrate the multi-volume rendering process for one sample along a viewing ray. We start the Residency Octree traversal at the root node and traverse the tree until we reach an empty node or a leaf node. Then we start processing each channel individually. First we render the blue channel that is available in the medium resolution in this example, then we render the red channel that is available in the highest resolution, and finally we render the green channel and choose to use the lowest resolution. So because the Residency Octree allows us to access any resolution from any node, and all channels share the same octree structure, we can easily mix different resolutions while using only a single hierarchy traversal for multi-channel empty space skipping. Now let's look at some results. We compare the Residency Octree with a standard octree approach as well as with a page table approach extended to multiple channels. For each method, we evaluate the rendering performance and GPU memory usage for 2 biomedical datasets which come with large numbers of channels, and 6 open VIS datasets where we simulate multiple channels by duplicating the volume and rendering each duplicate with a different transfer function. In all of our benchmarks, the Residency Octree outperforms the other approaches both in rendering performance and memory usage. This is because it supports more fine-grained empty space skipping that is independent of the bricking granularity in the dataset and independent of the resolution levels in the dataset. We can represent any node in any resolution and access any brick from any resolution directly. We thus do not require more bricks to be in memory than necessary. This is especially beneficial when rendering many different channels, as shown here for the size-if small dataset. In this talk, we have presented the Residency Octree, a novel approach for out-of-core multi-volume rendering that decouples the resolution-independent spatial subdivision of an octree from the resolution levels and bricking granularity in the dataset. We have shown that this data structure outperforms previous approaches in terms of rendering performance and GPU memory usage. It also supports a more fine-grained spatial subdivision for empty space skipping than the bricking granularity used in the dataset. This is especially useful in cases where we are not in control over the dataset, such as in web-based scenarios. We have also shown that our approach allows mixing resolutions for different channels. This opens up promising new research directions. For example, in the future it would be interesting to see if constraining the maximum resolution of a channel by taking its frequency content into account could lead to an even better cache utilization and rendering performance. This concludes our talk. For more details, we invite you to read our paper. Thank you very much for your attention.